MAGA politicians are the ones leading UFO disclosure, but MAGA audiences think it's a distraction. How will the downsizing of the National Security Council impact the management of unacknowledged special access programs run out of the White House without the president's knowledge? Pope Leo XIV and the Vatican will lead official UFO disclosure. UFO researchers continue to ignore contactee reports of non-human intelligence and focus exclusively on the cover-up of UFO sightings and, more recently, crash retrievals by authorities. Representative Anna Luna commented on the role of the CIA has played in blocking the release of truth pertaining to the assassination of President Kennedy. These stories and more on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome to the May 24th edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. So there's been a few stories over the last week that really give us some very interesting perspectives on what's happening around the world when it comes to UFOs and extraterrestrial life. So I want to begin with a story concerning Make America Great Again politicians who are leading the UFO disclosure effort, but the MAGA audience believe it's all a distraction. So Timothy Alberino discussed this. He is someone who's been researching UFOs for some time now, and he is doing the lecture circuit and he's getting a lot of interviews. So here's what he said in one of his interviews.
Questions about UAP, UFOs. And this included Congressman Eric Burleson, Congressman Tim Burchett, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna.
Those three have been all over it.
They're the core group in Congress who's working on this issue. And they're working tirelessly, and they're fiercely intelligent.
And they're all MAGA.
And they're all MAGA, for sure.
The types of people that could drive the attention, the MAGA base, are sitting there going, you know, they're stealing our country, the deep state's all over. That's the MAGA base, including 90% of this audience, who naturally would be saying, yeah, what the hell? Are hesitant because they're saying it's a misdirection.
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction.
Good question.
Okay, so there you have it. So there's a kind of very interesting irony here that Make America Great Again politicians, Tim Burchett, Anna Luna, and Eric Burleson, three of those that were named, that are all part of the MAGA camp and are all part of this UFO caucus that's been created in the House of Representatives, that they are really onto the UFO cover-up, and they're interviewing whistleblowers, trying to give them security clearances so that the members of Congress could be briefed fully on what's going on. So they're finding out that there's this UFO cover-up, that UFOs have crashed, they've been retrieved, they're being secretly studied in corporate laboratories, and also non-human intelligence being discovered. And so, you know, they're kind of like trying to really push that out there and get the disclosure process going in the US Congress, but yet the base, the MAGA base, they think it's all a distraction. So it's kind of like an irony there, and it kind of shows just how successful the whole Operation Mockingbird has been to make the UFO issue a subject of ridicule. That even though in the last 8 years, since the New York Times and other major news journals and the US Congress started to get involved and started to say that UFOs are real, that these are a serious national security issue, that still a majority of the American population think it's all kind of tinfoil hat territory and something to laugh at rather than to take seriously. And of course, a distraction from the serious things happening out there. Well, here is something that I thought was very interesting. This was a tweet concerning the National Security Council, which is allegedly directing and managing the US government's classified UFO programs, which will shrink from 300 staff members to around 50 and 60, and its role will shift from advising the president to only executing his directives. So the interesting thing here is that the National Security Council traditionally has had a total staff membership of around 300, and within that National Security Council, not necessarily the leaders, but there are key people within that are embedded within the National Security Council who are the kind of intermediaries or the links to these unacknowledged special access programs that involve UFOs and extraterrestrial life, and that these are being run out of the National Security Council, but without necessarily the president knowing about it. So this is the way it's been structured. The secrecy system is such that what you have is classified programs, special access programs that are run out of the National Security Council, and so the president is up to speed on that. He's given briefings on these special, some of these special access programs. For example, the latest generation spy plane that's being developed by Lockheed Martin for the US Air Force out of Area 51. So the president is given a briefing on that special access program. But what he's not briefed about is the unacknowledged special access program, which is embedded within or behind this special access program. So this is the way the secrecy system works, so that way all of the most sensitive unacknowledged special access programs, they always have these cover programs, which are still special access programs. And so that way you can keep it all secret. So if you have the National Security Council being trimmed down from 300 to 50, 60, how will that impact the running of these unacknowledged special access programs out of the White House? Now, I imagine that the people being trimmed are not the ones that have been briefed or the ones that are in charge of these special access programs. So that would mean that but what I think it would mean is that the National Security Council is now smaller, and those that are aware that there are these unacknowledged programs being run out of the NSC are more likely to find out who within the NSC are the point men or women for these unacknowledged special programs. So you have to ask, well, is this part of the rationale for trimming the NSC council staff from 300 to 50 or 60? Very, very likely. Here is an article that Kerry Cassidy wrote about an alien invasion and an AI takeover. So here's the article on Substack. I mean, Kerry Cassidy is someone that I think has put out a lot of really accurate information over, I think, more than 15 years now. I think she came out in 2008, 2009. So she's been around a long time. She's interviewed many hundreds, if not 1,000, whistleblowers, and she has a lot of really excellent information and sources. And so she is saying that there is a very high likelihood of an alien invasion happening soon, and that there is also an AI threat, that would be part of this alien invasion, that AI work very closely with some of the aliens that she thinks are going to be invading. So this is her article on Substack, In the Face of an Alien Invasion, National Sovereignty is a Liability, How Aliens and AI Use Divide and Conquer Over Humanity. So that is absolutely correct, that divide and conquer is how different alien races have been able to manipulate humanity, and that continues to this very day. I mean, the way in which you look at the division in the United States and other countries between those that are, let's say, part of the woke agenda and those that are part of the, make America great again, or make France great again, or make Italy great again crowd, make Romania great again, that there is this divide. And people not necessarily are fighting against each other, but they are in heated arguments. And this is precisely how aliens and AI that are associated with these different extraterrestrial groups have been able to conquer humanity. Now, I think the best book for kind of discussing that is The Gods of Eden by William Bramley, where he discusses, going back thousands of years, how divide and conquer has been used by a group of aliens that he calls the custodians, and that this is exactly how they do it. Now, so this raises the question of how will humanity be introduced to extraterrestrials? And I part company with Kerry over this. I don't believe that there will be an alien invasion. I just don't think that people will buy it. I think people would, Stephen Greer has been talking about this for decades now, that Werner von Braun warned Carol Rosen that the next step in the kind of deep state plan for augmenting their power, that they went through a number of different scenarios, beginning with terror, starting all the way back with rogue states, and then international terrorism, asteroids, and it would all finish with an alien invasion. So I think far too many people are aware of that. So I just don't think that that's what's going to be used. But what I think will be happening is more likely that there'll be a kind of like a formal alien takeover, more of aliens, the questionable extraterrestrials, operating in the background for power, to ones actually becoming publicly disclosed, and therefore their power base is going to increase. So I think the more likely scenario, more likely alien takeover, change of management scenario, will involve the Vatican announcing the arrival of human-looking extraterrestrials who are secretly aligned with the Vatican and Jesuits. And so this is something I'm going to be talking about more and more, because, as you all know, an American Pope was elected or selected by the cardinals in Rome, and you have to ask yourself, well, why did the cardinals do this? Well, I will comment on that in an article that I wrote and did a podcast on very, very shortly. But I think this will all be done in a way that is kind of like above board, peaceful. I don't think it'll be a hostile event like aliens arriving and start shooting up people in some kind of invasion scenario. I just don't think Kerry's scenario is very likely. Okay, so here is a post that was made by Elena Danan, and she created this album called Golden Veins, Tales of Nibiru. Here is the greatest epic saga of mankind, the Anunnaki expedition to Earth 332,000 years ago, put into a magnificent digital project. And so, it really is very impressive from what I have heard of that, this kind of music celebrating the arrival of the Anunnaki 330,000 years ago kind of really does, I think, bring to the public's attention the enormity of what happened there. That really was a very important event in the history of humanity. And of course, you've got the Sumerians talking about it, and that is part of our history. And people, want to know, well, what are the consequences of the Anunnaki arriving in this expedition so many millennia ago? Now, this is where I want to raise a question, because I know Elena's view is that the Anunnaki arrived, that Enki or Ea kind of like upgraded primitive hominids into present-day Adamic humans, and that he had help from his scientific team, and that he's the good guy, and that later on, after him, Enlil was the bad guy. He was the asshole brother, and he kind of like disrupted that experiment, and he's responsible for humanity being a two-stranded creature today, as opposed to the original 12-stranded DNA that humans had. Now, this is where I have come across information with a very different scenario, and that is that when the Anunnaki arrived 300,000 years ago, or around that time, 332,000, I think Elena had, when they arrived, that there were already 12-stranded humans living on Earth. Now, that didn't mean that the entire population was 12-stranded DNA, but the information I've come across is that those 12-stranded humans were, let's just say, conquered by the Anunnaki. Now, this is the key question, and the thing was that these humans, these 12-stranded humans, who were working with extraterrestrials who had created them prior to the arrival of the Anunnaki, that they were wiped out by the Anunnaki. Now, this is where you get into the question about, well, is this some kind of process that repeats itself again and again when extraterrestrials take over responsibility for a planet in terms of the genetic experiments being run there? That is this something analogous to like the way in which a young male lion will kind of like take over a lion pride by killing the older lion and killing all the cubs, all the male cubs of the younger lion, of the older lion. And so you have to ask yourself, well, is this what the Anunnaki did? They arrive on Earth. Humanity is widespread. There are these incredibly highly evolved 12-stranded DNA humans that were created by extraterrestrials who continue to work with them, and of course many ordinary hominids. Now, who wiped out those 12-stranded humans before Enki upgraded the two-stranded humans into kind of like early Adamic, his Adamic creation, which I believe had 12-stranded DNA before that was dumbed down by Enlil. But who wiped out the 12-stranded humans before the arrival of during the arrival of the Anunnaki? Who did that? Was it Enlil, which I think is probably more likely, as opposed to Enki or Ea, who, being a scientist, I think he, out of natural scientific curiosity, I think he would have probably wanted to learn more about those experiments. But anyway, that's a key question, I think, that we all have to ask ourselves. Exactly what happened, and what does that tell us about the Anunnaki, and especially the Enki-Ea faction of the Anunnaki that have returned, that are wanting to atone for past misdeeds committed by his half-brother Enlil. Is that something that we want to trust, or is it a kind of good cop, bad cop routine to get humanity to buy into the Anunnaki as trustworthy again? I have my doubts about the Anunnaki, even though I think Enki Ea is a very positive being. But I think he is part of a system. And even though he is a crown prince, according to Elena Danaan, and destined to become the ruler of the Anunnaki once his father Anu is ready to step down, I still think that the Nibiru mothership and that the different extraterrestrial groups that the Anunnaki are involved in, some of those are compromised and still continue to work with Enlil. But more about that in a future podcast. So here is Jack Safari, who is infamous for his diatribes against people he disagrees with. But nevertheless, he is a very competent scientist who has very interesting information that he has about extraterrestrial, or let's just say exotic propulsion systems. So Jack Safari said, quote, "And also these machines are themselves conscious. They control themselves." Here he's talking about UFOs, obviously. "They allow humans partial access. Reverse engineering has been allowed by these machines. We're not in control. They are in control. Non-human intelligence are in control. And that's why everything's being kept so secret. Time and again, the message is consistent. We are not in control." This is from UAP 1. Time and again, the message is consistent. We are not in control. And if it appears that we are in control, it is because it has been arranged for a higher purpose. And I think this is a very important insight, that the non-human intelligence, that the extraterrestrials that have control of recovered UFO craft, that even though these craft appear to have crashed, that even though the US or other countries are seemingly in control of these craft, these machines have a consciousness or an organic intelligence, and that if any successful reverse engineering is going to happen, it's being allowed by these machines. So this is where you get into the whole idea of grey extraterrestrial ships crashing. And the intent is to kind of compromise the military-industrial complex of any country that's involved in reverse engineering these, so that they can be manipulated by the aliens who remain in control of these crashed craft through the consciousness of the craft itself. So, yeah, I think this is something we need to consider, that extraterrestrial craft, that they, even if they crash, that we are not necessarily in control just because it appears to be, and that this has been arranged. And the example I give is David Adair, who visited in 1971. He visited Area 51, and he encountered this organic consciousness called Pithalum that actually was animating this extraterrestrial engine that the people running Area 51, a Dr. Arthur Rudolph, a German scientist who was part of the paperclip crowd, and they were trying to reverse engineer this extraterrestrial technology, but that the organic consciousness that animated that technology, that made it all work, that it didn't cooperate with Rudolph. And when David Adair showed up on the scene, it essentially merged with his consciousness. And that David has said in interviews, we did a 4-part interview, and he said in that 4-part interview series that Pithalum was using his body as a lifeboat. All right, so here is a former university professor who claims to have had contact with Pleiadian extraterrestrials. So this is Dr. Andrea Martin, who worked for 19 years at Worcester University there in Massachusetts, and she taught many classes, including several on UFOs. She began having extraterrestrial contact experiences between the ages of 2 and 3 and realized that she was walking from the Pleiades. Between the ages of 5 and 8, she was subjected to military abductions because the military have the technology to be able to track extraterrestrial contactees and anyone who is connected or communicating with extraterrestrials. So as a teenager, she was subjected to trauma-based mind control, memory wipes, and significant abuse. And I don't want to go into that, but you can imagine how an attractive young female teenager can be abused by these people in the deep state that practice memory wipes after these people have been used. One of the things that she said was that that there was an effort to weaponize her natural telepathic abilities, and that this effort was led by the Raytheon Corporation. So that's very interesting. Now, she claims to be in touch with a extraterrestrial husband from the Pleiades, Ika, who is part of the extraterrestrial contingent associated with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, currently working with the US Air Force. So this is something that JP has told me about, that there are Nordics that are working with the US Air Force. And in fact, we're going to be doing a update. Well, this update will come out tomorrow, first on my Patreon channel. So shout out to all my Patreon supporters. You get early access to the next JP video, which will come out at 7 a.m. or 7:15 a.m. on Sunday morning. And you get to hear JP sharing his latest update, where he talks about these Nordic-looking extraterrestrials that are working with the US Air Force. So you'll get to see that before everyone else, because for everyone else, it'll come out on Monday morning, a day later. So Dr. Martin, she continues to say she meets with her Pleiadian husband by him projecting his astral body to her home. And she says that since the age of 2 or 3, when she was taken aboard the ships, or a ship, an extraterrestrial ship, where they kind of like helped her remember everything about her past and so forth, that from that time up until the present moment, she has not been physically on the ships. She has been taken there astrally many, many times. So that's her contact experience. These have been through astral body projections to the ships of this Galactic Federation of Worlds, and also the astral body of her husband Ika, who comes down to meet with her, and that they have a romantic relationship. So she makes certain predictions in the interview we did. She claims that beginning in June, human-looking extraterrestrials will begin physically meeting with starseeds who are ready, and the contact process will gradually unfold over the next year. So that's kind of a bit of a surprise. Well, actually, maybe not so much a surprise, because JP has been saying this for well over a year now, that the Nordic extraterrestrials that he works with and the inner earth beings, that they are going to be more open about more open with their craft, with their flyovers, and that they're going to make more and more contact with people. So her information is certainly consistent with what JP has been telling us for a few years now. So yeah, this is a very interesting individual. I think she is very credible, and so I look forward to further interviews with Dr. Martin. Okay, so now let's look to the next story. Okay, so this is my article where I talk about the election of Pope Leo XIV. So I wrote an article, and also what I did was I did a video version of this article where you get the me reading the article, but also adding commentary. So I will be doing more of these in the future with selected articles, whether I've written them or others have written them, and just giving you what I will be calling exopolitics commentaries. So my aim is to do an exopolitics commentary once a week, along with an interview. Kind of overall fewer interviews, one interview a week rather than two, which I've been doing up until recently. And also the week in review, so that way you get to hear more of my views on what's going on. So in this interview, I talk about Pope Leo XIV and the role the Vatican is going to play in leading extraterrestrial disclosure. Now, the thing is, many people that are watching this think that, well, how can the Vatican play any role in extraterrestrial disclosure? I mean, it's the United States and Russia that are doing all the secret reverse engineering. They're the ones that have the unacknowledged special access programs. And, of course, China's playing catch up. Why in the world would the Vatican be involved in any of this or have a say in all of this? Well, there's a few reasons why. And I cover that in my paper. Essentially, the Vatican has played a critical role in this study and reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technologies. Many people maybe are not aware of this, but the Vatican has many top scientists, astronomers, astrobiologists, and many of them happen to be Jesuits. And so from the very early days of the extraterrestrial phenomenon, going all the way back to 1933, when the Italian government discovered a crashed flying saucer, the Vatican has been involved in the study and the reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technologies. Because one of the big contributions that the Vatican makes to this is that, sure, the Vatican is not a kind of technological power by any means, like the United States or Russia. They do have some talented scientists that are capable of understanding technology, advanced technology, and so forth. But where the Vatican excels in its understanding of the paranormal, of consciousness, of understanding demons and angels, and all of that is part and parcel of the extraterrestrial phenomenon. Especially when you come to the ships that use consciousness. I mean, that a lot of these extraterrestrial vehicles that have been recovered use consciousness. And so the Vatican has been playing a key role in trying to understand all that. And the other aspect of the Vatican involvement in this is that in 2008, 2009, Vatican astronomers began to come out talking about the likelihood that extraterrestrials will be discovered, and that in kind of like theological terms, they are our brothers, that they are our brothers and sisters in Christ, that because they're more ethically evolved, that they can understand the kind of the unique Christian perspective on Jesus of Nazareth and his kind of death and resurrection and all of that they believe that extraterrestrials can understand that. And so in 2008, you had a succession of Jesuit astronomers associated with the Vatican astronomy or the Vatican's observatory, that these Jesuit priests came forward talking about the extraterrestrials being our brother. And so there was a book written by Thomas Horn and Chris Putnam called Exo Vaticana that came out in 2013, which was the same year Pope Francis was elected as the Pope and replaced Pope Benedict, who for the first time in many, many centuries actually resigned as the Pope as opposed to dying. So Pope Francis came along, and so in their book Exo Vaticana, they give a lot of data about how the Catholic Church is planning to roll out a extraterrestrial savior, as well as a new global cosmo-Christian religion that other faiths will buy into, and that this will lead to the dissolution of the Catholic Church, that the Catholic Church will be kind of like rebranded, if you like, into this new global cosmic religion where Jesus is at the center of it all, and that this will be something that the Vatican is planning to do. So this book by Putnam and Horn was written in 2013. They thought that it would happen under Pope Francis, but what eventually happened was that the Vatican did not go ahead and disclose the existence of extraterrestrial life, that the Vatican essentially sat on that information because the deep state wouldn't allow it. And of course, there has been this big kind of struggle between the deep state and the white hats over disclosure, how much to disclose and when and so forth. But I think that the election of this American Pope, I think what that signals is that the Vatican, which really kind of like is very deft at positioning itself so that it can exploit all the major actors in international affairs. So on the one side, you've got the deep state, all the people associated with that. On the other hand, you've got the white hats, and the Vatican plays off both groups against each other, the whole divide and conquer. And the Vatican has been involved with reptilian extraterrestrials for many centuries. And if you wanted, and I talk about that in my article. And so with the election of the American Pope, I think what that signified was that the Vatican was signaling that they understand that the white hats, that the Earth Alliance are winning or have won this conflict against the deep state, that the deep state has lost. And the deep state is associated with satanic practices that involve many, many unsavory things with these young people, shall we say. You know what I'm talking about. And that the Vatican is shifting allegiance, that it was previously allied closely with the deep state in all of that stuff involving young people, very young people, and is now going to start working with the white hats and the Earth Alliance, and that this Pope Leo is going to be very significant, I think, in a future announcement concerning the arrival of extraterrestrials. And the first ones that will be rolled out, I think, will be human-looking extraterrestrials that are collaborating with the Vatican and the White Hats and the Earth Alliance. Exactly who that's going to be, we're not sure, but certainly it does give you, some concern about whether or not this will be for the good of humanity if the Vatican is involved in the disclosure process. But I think they will be because they are a powerful force, and that they will somehow co-opt the disclosure process to achieve their agenda. But the White Hats and the Earth Alliance, they want to have the Vatican on side. Okay, so here we have a story concerning laser technology. And in this story, what we have is a article by the Debrief that talks about the world's most powerful laser that that projected a laser beam that surpassed 100 times the global electrical power output. And now you obviously would ask yourself, well, how could it do that? Well, it did this for it lasted 25 quintillionths of a second. So in that 25 quintillionths of a second, the equivalent power that was generated would be 100 times the global electrical power output. So what I wanted to tell you or talk to you about was that that this kind of laser technology has been around for a long, long time. I mean, there's actual, I talk about this in my book, Antarctica's Hidden History, where the IG Farben, the famous kind of chemical manufacturing corporation that was a major supporter of Nazi Germany, that they actually produced the first patents on laser technology during the Second World War, and that the Germans went on to master that laser technologies for their laser cannons, for their flying saucer craft out of Antarctica. But as far as Western science is concerned, especially the United States and so forth, that we know that that this kind of open source scientific announcements typically lag anywhere from 30 to 50 years behind what is happening in the classified world. So we know, for example, and this project Zeus can harness energy levels 100 times the global electrical power output for 25 quintillionths of a second. So that's what the Debrief article talked about. You have to ask yourself, then classified laser systems can harness similar energy levels for far longer. Now, this, I think, is exactly the case, because this is exemplified in a couple of historic UFO cases in the early 1990s when powerful lasers began to be used to target visiting extraterrestrial spacecraft. So we know from at least the early 1990s, probably earlier than that, I think during Reagan's Star Wars, SDI, that laser technology was initially developed and became classified. But we know by the early 90s that there have been operational directed energy weapon systems using lasers developed at top secret classified facilities in the United States and around the world. Now, one example that I think is very noteworthy is this case involving the space shuttle STS-48, where you had a UFO taking evasive action to evade some kind of directed energy weapon, very likely a laser, being shot from somewhere on Earth's surface. And so there was a analysis of this by a Jack Kasher, a scientist who analyzed this, and he thought that this laser beam or this directed energy weapon originated from Pine Gap, Australia. So essentially what happened was that the Space Shuttle Discovery captures video footage of a UFO taking evasive action against a laser directed energy weapon from Pine Gap. And in 1992, a laser weapon, directed energy weapon, was used to bring down an ET mothership and scout craft over Long Island, New York. Here you have this case in 1992 involving the Brookhaven National Laboratory, that it was involved in the shooting down of 2 out of 3 UFO craft that were hovering over Long Island. One was a cigar-shaped mothership, and the other 2 were scout craft. Now, one of the scout craft was able to escape, but the laser weapon took down the mothership and the UFO. And so this has been known as the Brookhaven incident, and a book was written about it by a J.B. Michaels, and that book is titled UFO Encounters, and it explains what happened with the use of that directed energy weapon. So I think that those are 2 examples that I think really show that these kinds of laser weapons, such as Zeus, which the debrief article says, well, this is in the future, this is going to be a revolutionary technology, that in fact that has been developed and put into the field since the early 1990s, if not earlier, during the 1980s, during the SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative. Okay, so here let's continue. Right, let's go now to Luis Elizondo. So Luis Elizondo, he makes the statement, biological specimens and samples were recovered. I still have my security clearance with the United States government, and so because of that, I'm still held by non-disclosure agreement. But what I can say is what I've been cleared to say by the Pentagon previously. So let's listen to Luis Elizondo and what it is that he has said, and I'll look at some of the commentary and analysis of that.
I still have my security clearance with the United States government. And so because of that, I am still held by my non-disclosure agreement. But what I can say is what I've been cleared to say by the Pentagon previously, and that is that the U.S. government is in possession of extremely exotic material of unknown origin. And I can also say, after, by the way, a year of a back and forth dialogue with the Pentagon, I can also say now, without getting into trouble, that biologics or biological specimens and samples were recovered from some of the crashes involving some of this very, very exotic technology. This conversation is dynamic. It's ongoing right now. There's a lot of people, both at the Pentagon and at the CIA and within our intelligence community, that are trying to figure out how to have this conversation with the American people. Why is that? It's because it's been over 70 years of misinformation that has been put out. And now the government finds itself in a situation where it has to basically unwind that tape. Despite telling the American people that there's nothing to see here, it turns out that there was quite a bit to see. And this sense of stigma and taboo, which, as you mentioned yourself, Phil, in the beginning, has tended to relegated this conversation to kind of the backwaters of fringe conspiracies. And it turned out that it's actually very, very true. I still have.
Okay, so here is the thing that that I think is very relevant. That's the transcript of what Luis Elizondo said. But if the Department of Defense cleared public statements confirming recovery of biological specimens from UAP crash retrieval operations, it constitutes de facto acknowledgement of non-human materials. So, this is a very good observation from what Luis Elizondo said in that interview with Dr. Phil, that he said he was cleared by DOPSA, which is a Department of Defense pre-publication unit that clears what it is that former employees can or can't say in public, in interviews or in books. And so he apparently was cleared to make public statements saying that UFO crash retrieval operations have happened and that non-human biological experiments or non-human biological materials were recovered. And so this tweet makes the case that this is de facto acknowledgement of non-human materials. And then it goes on to say, withholding this from Congress violates statutory oversight and reporting obligations. Now, I think what Alzando experienced or saw is very different to what he was told. I mean, in terms of what he saw or what he directly experienced in the performance of his duties while at the Pentagon, I mean, that is one matter. The other matter is, what he was told. So if he was told by people in the know that, oh, yes, UFO crash retrieval operations have happened and that non-human biological specimens have been recovered and so forth, he can talk about that, because it's secondhand information. It's anecdotal. That's anecdotal information as opposed to an eyewitness who sees the craft that's crashed. We're talking like someone like Jake Barber, for example, who was directly involved in UFO crash retrieval operations, that he saw a egg-shaped UFO that had crashed, that he was part of the operation to retrieve that is direct eyewitness testimony. It is not anecdotal. But if he tells someone and that person then goes on to relate the story, then it's secondhand, anecdotal. And so I think this is why Lou Elizondo is able to talk about these things. And I think it is a kind of de facto acknowledgement that crash retrieval operations have happened and that non-human materials have been discovered. Okay, so here is something that I learned about through a tweet, a X post by Ross Colart about this essay detailing how the US government has used clever disinformation to suppress public understanding of non-human intelligence and UFOs. So let's go to this article. This article is on the New Paradigm Institute website, An Introduction to US Government Suppression of Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena and Advanced Sciences. And what it says is this introduction to the Disinformation Series essay collection outlines how the US government has systematically used secrecy, disinformation, and legislative controls to suppress public understanding of non-human intelligence, UAPs, and advanced scientific research, thereby obstructing the transparency, accountability, and discovery. So it's quite a long article, and there is a section here that let's just say that what this article focuses on is the historic cover-up of UFO sightings and reporting of UFOs. And that this is something that I believe is a kind of reflection of how UFO researchers have traditionally ignored the contactee testimonies of people who have actually been inside of the craft. So what I say is I find it amazing that after more than 70 years, UFO researchers continue to ignore contactee reports of non-human intelligence and focus exclusively on the cover-up of UFO sightings and more recently crash retrievals by authorities. So that New Paradigm Institute article, it talks about this cover-up of UFO sightings going all the way back to Project Sign. And, of course, there's more recently been these crash retrievals. Now, what the authors of the paper and Ross Colart himself need to consider is historical data of those that actually went inside of the alien spacecraft, the UFOs, and took photos of the craft they witnessed. Yeah, this is really a kind of blind spot, I think, with a lot of UFO researchers, that they believe that UFOs are real, that they've been coming since at least the 1930s, with that reported Italian UFO crash, and that you've had some crashes and people have taken incredible photos of these craft, and the crashes have been conducted by government and corporate actors in the United States and around the world. Many UFO researchers will accept that. But when people come forward and say, I actually went inside of one of the craft and talked to the extraterrestrial pilots or the extraterrestrial crew, I was taken for a ride, and I actually have photos of the craft, when it was departing or before I got on it, that I have photos of that. That UFO researchers traditionally have been very, very dismissive. In fact, very aggressive against contactees. And you can go all the way back to Major Donald Keyhoe, who is like the undisputed father of modern ufology, through his books and him setting up the National Institute, the NICAP organization, that he was like the undisputed leader of serious UFO research. And he was very, very critical of contactees. He thought that they were just charlatans trying to take advantage of a gullible public when it came to UFOs. So in my view, if you're going to take the UFO issue seriously, then you got to look at contactee reports. Anyone that claims to be a serious UFO researcher, look at these reports. And if you don't find them credible, then explain why you don't find them credible, but rather than just dismissing or ignoring or debunking. So if you can begin with George Adamski, who took incredible photos of flying saucers and cigar motherships. Adamski's photos from 1952 are some of the clearest and best UFO photos you'll ever see. And you actually see a sequence of photos that show a mothership, a cigar-shaped craft, and these scout craft coming out of it. Then you have Billy Meyer and his extensive collection of photos backing up his contactee claims. Now, many people say, well, isn't Meyer a proven hoaxer, that many of his photos have been shown to be hoaxed? That is true. Some of the photos were hoaxed, but that was part of a disinformation campaign to discredit the many hundreds of genuine photos he did take. And I've done a couple of interviews with Britt Elders, who was part of the original investigatory team that went to Switzerland to meet with and study the Billy Meyer case. And they began very skeptically, and they got some of the original photos, and they are adamant that the Billy Meyer case is genuine, that the photos that they got, that these were genuine, there was no hoaxing, but that later on you did have government operatives infiltrating the Meyer organization or infiltrating the photo processing lab where he would take his roll of negative film, and that there was some kind of compromising of the data. And of course, more recently, there is US Army veteran JP, and he has, and I've been covering his experiences publicly since 2017, where I've been putting out articles about his contact experiences with both extraterrestrial craft and also secret space program craft belonging to the US Air Force. Now, the critical thing about JP's testimony is that you don't just have his word for it. There are photos, dozens and dozens of photos that he took, and some video that he took of the craft. And you can clearly see UFO flying saucer craft. These are not just blur, or, these are not just kind of like white lights that you can't make out in the dark. These are flying saucer craft that you can see. So they are really very good. Now, unfortunately, the camera he had was not the best. He used his smartphone, and it really isn't a high resolution, but nevertheless, you see what is clearly a flying saucer during daylight. Okay, Very few contactees are able to do that. JP can, as did Billy Meyer before him, George Adamski before him. And I think these are people that researchers such as Ross Colart really should be trying to interview JP. I mean, why aren't they contacting me or contacting JP saying we want to interview you because, yeah, you got an incredible story that we find hard to believe, but you got these photos, and these photos are very, very compelling, and you took them near military bases, and you were told by military personnel to look up, to take the photos. You were prodded. I mean, isn't that a big, big story? Why doesn't Ross Colart look at that? I think he should. All right, so yes, my article on the American popes that came out first on Patreon, and then it was made available on multiple platforms, including my website, exopolitics.org. All right, so here is something that Vicky Verma, who is I guess he covers the unexplained UFOs. So he's fond of UFOs, ET, and ancient history, and he's the editor of How and Why. So he posted, I think, a very nice summary of a webinar or a live stream David Wilcock did on the pineal gland. And okay, so let's see what Vicky Verma had to say. David Wilcock claims that Area 51 secret research revealed that the pineal gland is much more than just part of the brain. It's the real third eye. He says it's physically connected to the brain's visual system, even has eye-like cells. When you fall asleep, electrical activity around the pineal gland creates a Faraday cage. In a long live stream on YouTube, Wilcock said that the pineal gland is the part of your brain that allows you to access a different realm or dimension when you sleep and dream. He claims that this happens through a kind of electromagnetic process involving light, crystals, and protective energy shields. According to him, as you start to fall asleep and your surroundings get darker, the pineal gland becomes very active. It has the highest blood flow in the body, and electrical activity begins swirling around it, and it goes on. I won't read the whole thing. I do have the links to all of my tweets, all of these tweets that I'm commenting about, in the description of this article of this podcast, so you can click and read the whole thing yourself. But what I wanted to point out here is that David Wilcock provided a lot of historical data showing just how much the pineal gland was part of the ancient history, going back to Sumerian cuneiform texts. And he showed some texts with these glyphs showing an Anunnaki, presumably Enki or Ea, with a pine cone and putting it up against the primitive humans that were being created. And so this is what I wanted to, a point I wanted to make about that process and the historical texts that show the Anunnaki holding pine cones, which is, Wilcock points out that this is the basic shape of the pineal gland, and that these glyphs symbolize that the Anunnaki understood the importance of the pineal gland for human evolution and being able to have dreams, visions, and these kind of clairvoyant abilities that the third eye provides. Okay, so David Wilcock's analysis of the pineal gland provides many insights into its core functions and how it relates to dreams, visions, and the third eye. I appreciated the historical analysis he gave of the pineal gland, especially the emphasis that the Anunnaki gave to it. In many cuneiform texts, an Anunnaki, Enki, Ea, is depicted holding a pine cone that is placed next to human creations. Wilcock interprets this as the Anunnaki knowing that the pineal gland's important, knowing that pineal gland's importance in stimulating human higher functions. Okay, so this is how Wilcock interpreted those glyphs, and I think many have made similar interpretations in the past. Now, this is where I think it's worth raising another interpretation. There is, however, another interpretation that intrigues me. George Cavassalis, who's another contactee, claims that the Anunnaki created the pineal gland as a means of controlling humanity, whereby dreams, visions, etc. feed directly into a God matrix. It's very interesting. That suggests that rather than Enki/Ea holding a pine cone for the purpose of stimulating the pineal gland, that in fact such glyphs are evidence that Enki and the Anunnaki created it and inserted it into humans as part of the control system, as Cavassalis claims. So this is where you get these glyphs showing Enki holding a pine cone up against a human. And the question is, how do you interpret that? Is that a sign that, okay, symbolically the pine cone represents the pineal gland, and this showed that Enki-Ea understood the importance of the pineal gland for humans achieving their highest potential? Or is it evidence for what Cavassalis claims, that the Anunnaki actually created the pineal gland and inserted it into humans when they arrived, and that this has been a control mechanism ever since, part of what Cavassalis talks about as the God matrix. Now, in George Cavassalis's view, we should get all our information from the heart center, that the heart center doesn't lie. It tells us things as they are, that he says that there's this point of infinity in the heart center, not the heart chakra, but the heart center. The point of infinity is there, and as you connect with that, that is the source of the higher self. And as you connect with that, you get the truth of everything. But if you rely on the third eye, if you rely on the pineal gland, what you're going to get is you're going to feed into this God matrix created by the Anunnaki that is designed to control and manipulate humanity. Now, where I stand on all of that, I am very intrigued by what Cavassalis is proposing, and I think that is something that we need to be very aware of, rather than accepting the standard interpretation that Enki holding the pine cone is evidence that he was trying to stimulate it, as opposed to the Anunnaki creating it and installing it into early hominids as a control mechanism, which is what Cavassalis is proposing. So I think that's a very interesting hypothesis. Okay, so here we have Representative Anna Luna talking about a hearing on the JFK assassination. So let me play this video for you, where you get to hear that's a researcher explaining how the JFK case has been the JFK assassination has been historically suppressed by the CIA. So let me play that for you now.
Past 62 years, the Central Intelligence Agency has actively and continuously obstructed the investigation of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, with no consequences for their actions. 10 years ago, the CIA's official historian admitted that the CIA had hidden information from the Warren Commission during its investigation. The CIA stonewalled the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, the Church Committee. The CIA was not forthcoming with the Rockefeller Commission, The CIA misled and slow-walked the Assassination Records Review Board. James Angleton's preferred method in dealing with the Warren Commission was to, quote, wait them out. The first CIA officer I ever interviewed looked at me and said, "You represent Congress. What the F is that to the CIA? You'll be gone in 2 years, and we'll still be here." In 1978, the CIA ran an illegal domestic covert operation involving an undercover officer to subvert and obstruct the House Select Committee on Assassinations. That officer served undercover. That terminology is the terminology the CIA used to describe his assignment working with the Select Committee in a statement that their representative made under penalties of perjury in a lawsuit in 2005.
All right, so here you have a Mr. Hardway, former Select Committee on Assassination. So I don't know if he was a staffer on that committee or he was a member of Congress, but nevertheless, he was cited by Representative Anna Luna as someone that was very familiar with the role of the CIA in obstructing the release of the truth pertaining to the assassination of President Kennedy. Okay, so this is where I get to make my comment, which is that, yes, Representative Luna pointed out the role of the CIA in, quote, blocking the release of truth pertaining to the assassination of President Kennedy. So, this is not a surprise. The CIA's counterintelligence chief, James Jesus Angleton, was the CIA's gatekeeper for classified UFO files from 1954 up until 1975. And this encompassed the period when President Kennedy was elected and was assassinated. So when JFK, 1961, soon after he came to power, demanded access to these UFO files in the first months of his presidency, Angleton was given instructions by his superior, the Director of Central Intelligence, Alan Dulles, on what to do. Dulles had secretly summoned the MJ-12 Group's executive committee to pass a set of 8 directives, one of which included Project Environment, which was a cryptic assassination directive that could be implemented against any member of the executive branch of government. On November 12, 1963, after JFK and Khrushchev had agreed on joint US-Soviet space and lunar operations, that's a fact, and sharing UFO files, that is still contested, Angleton used Project Environment to authorize the hit on JFK in broad daylight. So there was a leaked CIA document that actually mentioned Alan Dulles having the MJ-12 directive and how to respond to Kennedy's request to the then director of the CIA in 1963, which was John McCone, in terms of sharing all classified UFO files with the sharing all of those with NASA, so that NASA could then in turn share all its files with the Soviet Union as stipulated in a National Security Action Memorandum. I think it was 271 that actually had passed and is an official document that was released under FOIA. So I think this is a good thing that there's more of an understanding of the role of the CIA in blocking the truth, but clearly the release of JFK assassination files has not led to the full role or the truth about why the CIA blocked Kennedy. Those files that have been released, none of them really go into the UFO phenomenon. All right, so here is an announcement concerning my next monthly briefing. This is going to be held on June 7. I do these briefings where I get to comment on the top 5 exopolitics news stories from the previous month, and also comment on breaking geopolitical news and give you an exopolitical perspective. So in my next monthly briefing that's going to be held on June 7, so I'm going to be talking about the American Pope, give you some more insights about him and UFO disclosure, the role of the US Congress in having UFO whistleblowers come forward and brief them on what has been going down involving crash retrieval operations and non-human intelligence and reverse engineering, and talking about other breaking geopolitical events from an exopolitics perspective. And finally, there'll be a Q&A at the end of that. So the whole thing goes for anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours. And if you become a Patreon Tier 2 supporter, you get to have this monthly live briefing for free. And if you don't want to become a monthly subscriber at the Tier 2 level, which is the solar patron, then you could just register for the conference, for the briefing by just going directly there to Crowdcast. So you can actually go there at Crowdcast and register through that website, and you can attend that way. So either way is fine. You could either just join Patreon as a Tier 2 member and you will be manually added to this webinar, or you could go to Crowdcast. The link is provided in the announcement, and you can then just participate in the webinar. So that's it as far as today's exopolitics week in review is concerned. I want to thank you for attending, and I want to thank all my Patreon subscribers for continuing to support me during my health crisis over the last few months. But I'm feeling much better. As you can hear, my voice is not I don't have a really bad cough anymore, so I've made a full recovery from the pneumonia and bronchitis. It was a pretty rough patch, but I appreciate all of those that supported me throughout that very challenging period. And now I'm much better, and I'm enjoying doing more interviews, doing more articles, and these live briefings that I'm now able to hold again. So thank you for watching, and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.